And I'm doing this in my studio. I'll get to that purpose later. This is where I do my radio stuff at. Yeah, I know because of the way things are on the internet, you get attacked for playing secular music. This film is going to be about Jacob Prash, my associations with him. And just so you know, Jacob likes the same kind of music that I like. So let's start out with why does God allow deception? Hey, a little disclaimer here: you don't have to take an oath of silence. Some of the study guides that I'm reading are either off my Bible or they're off an unnamed source. I get a lot of information from Got Questions, and it doesn't list the authors. So just letting you know that to be upfront. God's desire is that all people repent and be saved. 2 Peter 3:9. At the same time, Satan, the father of lies, John 8:44, deceives the very people who need to accept the truth. The God of this age has blinded the mind of unbelievers, so they cannot see the light of the gospel or the glory of Christ. 2 Corinthians 4:4. Surely God could stop Satan's lies and give people a fighting chance. Wouldn't that be nice? The Bible presents a consistent picture of how sin and deception are related. What's relieved is that the way we tend to think of deceit is, well, I think we're a little bit deceived in what we think deception is. Spiritually speaking, deception is deeper than merely being tricked or lied to. In order to be saved, one does not need any particular level of intelligence, philosophical ability, or wisdom. And you can look up Galatians 3:28 or 1 Corinthians 1:20 or verse 26 to verify that. In fact, mankind has an unfortunate habit of using increased knowledge of developing more sophisticated ways to sin. And shame on us. Key to understanding spiritual deception is the fact that we often choose what we want to believe. Let me repeat that again. The key to spiritual deception is we choose what we want to believe rather than what we should believe, even in the face of the actual evidence. And that's taken place not just with Jacob Prash and Moriel, but all over the internet with all kind of stuff. And beware of trolls is all I got to say about that. Even in the face of evidence, look up Luke 16:31. Even after Jesus had done all these miraculous signs in their presence, they still did not believe in him. I mean, Jesus showed he was God very plainly, and they still did not believe in him. John 12:37. Notice that they would not believe Jesus despite the miracles. Their unbelief, it was willful unbelief. Eve's fall into sin, and Adam sinned as well. But Eve's fall into sin is the earliest example of how spiritual deception works. When the serpent asked her, did God really say? Eve responds by quoting what God had said, although she added to the command, Genesis 3:1 through 3, right off the get go. She knows what to do and what not to do. The serpent then tempts her with something that she could be gained from eating off the tree. Hey, here's what you get for this. Genesis 3:4 through 5. And she notices other attractive aspects of the fruit. Genesis 3:6. Eve was lied to, and the serpent was very cunning. 2 Corinthians 11:3. But she ultimately chose to disobey God, even though she knew what his commandment was. When confronted with her sin, Eve said, the serpent deceived me and I ate. Genesis 3:13. The original Hebrew word for deceive implies trickery and craftiness. Eve was tricked, but she had also had a choice in that matter. She has free will. She exercised her God given free will to make a wrong choice, seeking pleasure and personal promotion. Let me repeat that one. She exercised her God given free will, to make a wrong choice, seeking pleasure and personal promotion over what God had willed for her. The same dynamic is at work today, and we'll be talking about that later on in this film. Satan appeals to our natural desires and urges us to fulfill them in ways that dishonor God. Our desire for self satisfaction makes Satan's deception all the more potent. God has sent the Savior, John 3:16, obviously. He fills the world with signs of himself, Romans 1, verse 20. He makes himself available to those who seek him, Deuteronomy 4:29, and he secures anyone who comes to him, John 6:37. When people reject what is clearly seen of God, Romans 1:20, it leads to a downward spiral of foolish hearts that are made dark. That's verse 21. Idolatry, verse 23, and sexual impurity, verse 24 in Romans again. Finally, mankind exchanged the truth of God for a lie, verse 25. In other words, the spiritual deception of mankind is a direct result of rejecting readily apparent truth. The unbeliever has made an exchange, the truth for a lie, and the devil is happy to facilitate the swap with a wide array of lies which to choose. Anyone who resists God risks falling into spiritual deception. 2 Thessalonians 2:8-10. Just think about the great deception that's coming at the end with the Antichrist. If you can't even discern things that are going on right now, what kind of problems are you going to have when the Antichrist comes on the scene? Nature abhors a vacuum and the void created by the eviction of truth, and they fill it with something less than true, half truths sometimes. Give up the truth and you'll believe just about anything. Eve didn't sin because she was hopelessly outmatched by demonic force, making her do the wrong thing, though she thought she was doing the right thing. Yes, she was lied to, but she chose to listen to the lie. How many times do we choose to listen to a lie today? That was followed by her longing look at what was forbidden. Think about that. And finally, her taking the fruit in hopes of a better life. All sin is based on human choice, 1 Corinthians 10:13. When we reject the truth, we make ourselves vulnerable to the lie. Repeated rejection of spiritual truth brings spiritual deception as a divine consequence. God often allows spiritual deception as a form of punishment for willful sin in order to cultivate an awareness in our lives of how badly we need the one who is himself is truth, Jesus Christ. John 14:6. And God will hand us over to a lie if we just keep thinking about that. Now, Jacob's ministry, I did over 600 videos with Jacob, and I don't hate Jacob. A lot of people say, well, why are you making these type of videos? I'm making these type of videos, and this will be the last one, hopefully, under God's grace and mercy. And I need to be obedient to God as well. Made over 600, I think 640 videos with Jacob, have had literally hundreds of hours of conversation with Jacob via Skype and in person. So I know Jacob pretty well. I don't hate the guy. I really don't. And I believe he's a Christian. I believe he's massively off track now. But let's talk about the Hebraic roots movement, which Jacob has spoken out about. I mean, Jacob has spoke out about the deception of the Hebrew roots movement. I know because I did a film with him on that.
You'd be hard-pressed to find which tribe a Jew is now, although people have talked about names like Levi and Levison and Siegel being from the tribe of Levi and so forth, or Davidson being from the tribe of Judah. People have said things like that, and they may have some point to it. But after all these generations and centuries, we can't be dogmatic about it. Now understand something. Under the Israeli right of return, the law of return, if you have one Jewish grandparent and can prove it, you can conditionally be allowed to immigrate to Israel. The reason being that if you had one Jewish grandparent, that's why Hitler would kill you, would have put you in a concentration camp. So the law of return is a response to the dictates of Nazism, of the Third Reich. Many of the Russian Jews, probably between 30 and 40%, are only a quarter Jewish. Or, in addition, many of them are simply married to Jews.
I'm trying to use an analogy of why we choose, why things are appealing to us. So the Judaizing threat that we had, remember the Judaizers, read the book of Galatians for more on that. The Judaizing threat actually ended at the fall of Jerusalem in AD 70. Prior to that, Messianic believers were considered to be a sect. Acts 24, verse 5 says, "For we found this man a real pest and a fellow who stirs up dissension among all the Jews throughout the world, and a ringleader of the sect of the Nazarenes." So I guess they're originally called Nazarenes or sect of the Nazarenes. And then it does say in Acts 11:24, and when they found him, they brought him to Antioch, and for an entire year they met with the church and taught considerable numbers, and the disciples were first called Christians in Antioch. Um, but they were actually known as a sect of Judaism, an actual branch of Judaism. But then after AD 70, all the Christians were on their own, and they were recognized as separate from Judaism. A more, and I'll tell you what, the Hebrew roots movement, and there's a lot of teaching on the internet about that. Um, it's they like to talk about bringing Christianity back to its Jewish roots. Now, I've went through things in my life where I wanted to wear a prayer shawl, and I think all the intentions a lot of times with people wanting to speak Hebrew and being like Jesus. I had a prayer shawl for a while because I figured that's the way Jesus prayed, and I wanted to be with it, be like him because I love him. Truly, he saved me. So I understand, and I think Jewish praise dancing is beautiful beyond belief. I have friends in Israel as well. But the Hebrew roots movement, that actual movement, which I'm not saying Moriel is part of, but they want to bring Judaism, your Christianity back to Judaism. I don't think we have freedom in Christ. I don't think there's anything wrong at all with teaching on the feasts and how Christ fulfilled all the feasts. So it's a good thing to be reminded of the Jewish roots of Christianity. It is beneficial to understand the Jewish holidays for sure and how Jesus fulfills each one of them. But if you run across somebody who claims to be restoring the Jewishness of Christianity, or say that the Jews have some kind of inside angle into Christianity, read the book of Galatians and call me in the morning, because that's what was taught. And I know a couple people who are ex-Jews, true Jewish believers, who still do not eat pork and stuff like that. Hey, respect that. Scripture is pretty plain about that. I used to play with Gary Lewis and the Playboys. Let me use a music analogy because it'll easier explain what I need to say. There were people when I was with Gary Lewis and the Playboys that would come up to us and have old album covers, and they would say, "Would you sign this for me? Which one are you?" And that was before I was saved, but I still wanted to be straight up. I'd say, "No, I'm not any of those guys." Number one, I'd never let my hair look like that. But that being apart, I wasn't any of those guys. But they still believed I was one of those guys. So they were believing what they wanted to believe. And here's a little bit deeper deception on that. The Wrecking Crew actually played all the music on the Gary Lewis and the Playboys albums, plus hundreds, even thousands of recordings. Like they did the music for the Monkees and a lot of the bands back in the 60s, the Wrecking Crew. I got a Hal Blaine drumhead on my wall. He was a friend of mine, passed away in 2018. And they did those recordings because they could get into the studio quick. So there's kind of double this. I said all that to say kind of double deception. The people still believed I was one of those guys on the album, even after I told them I wasn't one of those guys in the album. I still autographed um, the album, of course, to, be polite and all that stuff. But not only that, was Gary Lewis didn't even play his own music. He sang, and he is a talented musician, and he's a Bible believing Christian at this point. So, good for him. And that's great. But with Jacob, I'll tell you what, there's so much on the internet exposing him right now because he tells a lot of half truths, a lot of half stories. I miss our conversations about music because he's very knowledgeable about music. But I would ask Jacob, did you really witness to John Lennon before he was murdered, or George Harrison in his hospital room? How would you have even accessed George Harrison in a hospital room? But you told me a detailed story of George Harrison and your time with him there, and that you gave him The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe C.S. Lewis book as a witnessing tool, and he threw it across the room. Now, I know that David Lister did not work for Elvis, as you stated before, to me. And when I asked David Lister about that, he became very uncomfortable and just didn't answer me. But he was not part of the Memphis mob, which was Elvis's inner circle. And how do I know that? Because I fact checked with Hal Blaine, who was one of Elvis's drummers as well. Now, people have asked me, why doesn't Jacob apologize? Well, I'll tell you what, I have terabytes of our conversations together, and I went through a lot of old stuff. Jacob told me years ago, he thinks of Christianity more in secular terms. That's my opinion. And Jacob had told me that years ago, he never apologizes for anything because apologizing would make him liable in a court of law. With that in mind, Jacob can't even step down from ministry quietly, as that would be an admission of guilt to him. And a friend of mine picked up on that statement as well. I was amazed that the Moriel followers still stuck with Jacob after he announced on Facebook and on video. And I'm going to play that and show you all the proof to all this stuff where he said he denied living in England. We did all the Skype stuff from his home in England. I even got a picture of his street. Now, he's moved since then. He does not live in the home that he does, but now he's doing films with Amos Farrell in England. And Jacob has dual citizenship, really taxed. And I've went into their tax thing with Moriel. Their 990 is still not up there. They're not being transparent. Plus, they misrepresent my good friend Sandy Simpson's ministry on Moriel.org. That ministry, as listed on there, from talking with Sandy, that no longer exists in that state. I'm not saying that Sandy doesn't still witness to Micronesians, but the way it's advertised on Moriel.org is not accurate. It's a lot of people have said Moriel has grown. The only thing that's really grown on their website is their donation button. It's proven to everyone as of now that Jacob is Jewish because of Pavia. When he says, well, my family is half Jewish, it's half Jewish because saying his family, meaning Pavia, Eli, and Beth, who were Israeli. Now, I'm going to show you also where Jewish community centers, they're open to the public. Jacob told me his dad was Catholic. There's actually proof that he was buried. Number one, that Jacob's dad, his nickname was Red, was buried in a Catholic cemetery. Jacob's mom and his father were married in a Catholic church, according to Jacob. So you would have a Jewish man would not be able in those days to marry. I would assume they got married in the 40s or the 50s. Would not have been able to be married unless they got a dispensation from the local bishop to be married in a Catholic church, as well as the dispensation from the bishop, as well as Jacob's dad would have had to join Roman Catholicism. So when Jacob talks about his family being half Catholic, he always talks about his mom. I've never, ever heard Jacob, to my knowledge, say directly that his dad was Jewish. Now, I've heard so many other stories that Jacob's mom was originally Jewish, and then she converted to Catholicism because she didn't want to be under persecution. I mean, there's so many stories on the internet. I'm not blaming that on Jacob. That's not his fault. But can people come to the conclusion that Jacob is really half Jewish? Well, Jacob says his heritage on tape. Jacob says his heritage is not Jewish.
Do you think then that your draw to dealing with things of the children of Israel, of the Jews, is that because of your own ancestry, your own heritage? Your father was Jewish, even though it was nominal and secular?
No.
What drew you to that?
If you read my testimony online, Now, my wife's family is fully Jewish. Her parents are Holocaust survivors. Her children are born in Galilee. I myself was brought up Roman Catholic because of my mother. Some crazy people put something on the internet about my background and identity, and I maternally complete Irish Catholic, as far as I know. Complete Irish Catholic for generations back. I don't know anything other. My mother sent me to Catholic school. I did, at the behest of my father, attend a Jewish community center with my siblings in the States as a kid, but that was it. There was never any bar mitzvah or anything. Nothing. Absolutely nothing. Now, so I never identify myself as a Jew per se, never. However, in Israel, there are two definitions legally of a Jew. There are two. There is the halakhic one, that is the religious one, which has bearing in civil court and civil law. But the other is based on the law of return. If the Nazis would have killed you because of some Jewish ancestry or association, they would consider you a Jew and give you a Jewish ID card, known as a Teudat Zayut. It is given by something called the Saknut Yehudi. The Jewish agency legally determines Jewish ancestry. And they have different ways of doing it. They go back to ancestry, and obviously now they use DNA tests and things like that.
Very much the same as they're doing today with those who make an aliyah.
Yeah, correct.
As long as you identify with the Jew and your parentage was Jewish in the same way.
Well, there's a high percentage of people in Israel, particularly among the Russians. We're talking now a few 100,000 among Russian immigrants who are not halakhically Jewish, but they're on the Teudat Zayut. And, well, before I had lymphatic edema, I was actually thin. Before I had lymphatic edema. And that's what I look like. If you're wondering, if you look at my earlier videos, I was normal weight. I was never a big guy until I developed lymphatic edema. I assure you, it's not pizza. It's lymphatic. It's lymphatic fluid. I suffer from lymphatic edema. I go around with 50 plus kilos of lymphatic fluid, and it's not curable.
Swollen feet or legs. It's an ailment that pregnant women know far too well. But they aren't the only sufferers of the condition, also called edema. Let's take a look at how edema progresses. You see here a pair of normal feet and legs. Now compare that to this pair of swollen feet and legs. See how puffy they appear? That's because fluid has built up in the spaces between the cells of the body. FootSmart recommends consulting your physician for a professional diagnosis. Now that you've seen the telltale swelling from edema, let's talk about some of the other symptoms. Edema happens when small blood vessels in the body leak and release fluid into nearby tissue, causing the area to swell. You may notice the swelling gets worse as the day progresses. You have a higher risk of edema if you're a diabetic, pregnant, or suffer from kidney, heart, liver, or blood vessel conditions such as varicose veins and venous insufficiency. Other causes of edema include a poor diet that's high in salt and carbohydrates, hormone replacement therapy, and neuromuscular disorders.
It's only manageable.
Because you're in constant meds with that as well, I believe.
Yeah, that's right. I take enough diuretics to join the fire brigade, but that only works up to a certain point. I have lymphatic edema, lymphoedema. It's just a disease I have. But that's what caused me to get so big. It almost killed me in 2015 because it predisposes you to cellulitis, and I almost got buried.
But Jacob does not simply say, no, my dad was Jewish, but here's the way it is. I went through Pavia to become a Jew in it when he went to Israel, and he had the legal right to do that. So the thing is, It is so hard. I understand from Amos's point of view, it's hard to interview Jacob because he's a one-man show. He's an entertainer. He's a one-man show. And it's very difficult. When Sandy and I taped Lying Signs and Wonders at Devore with Jacob and Sandy, you watch that tape. You can see Jacob was physically uncomfortable with somebody else asking him questions. Now he seems at ease with Amos. Thought Amos should put his shoes on, but we won't even go there. Oh, we just did. Oh, well. But anyway, Jacob, it's all muddled. Jacob goes on to muddy the waters. Moriel and their associates are flat out lying about David Nathan. They are not. They either didn't check all the evidence or they're willfully ignorant about what David Nathan stated. David Nathan, he's not a heretic. And if David Nathan is a heretic, why have they promoted him on Moriel TV Vimeo for over a year now, and they still have a tape of his up on Moriel Ministries YouTube? So what's that all about? I mean, if the guy's a heretic, shouldn't Jacob protect him from his flock, which is his flock? With calling Jacob a thug and stuff like that, he's a bully. I'll tell you what, the guy's a bully, well known for that. Thug, I put that more on David Lister, but hey, you're entitled to your own opinions, come to your conclusions on what these guys are. But David Nathan is not a heretic. There's been some talk about that I kept passwords from Josh. That's not true. I can prove that through email. All kind of rumors out there by Azimuth Radio and others that I stole equipment and money from Moriel. Again, not true. I got emails that can prove that. And it's funny when I put out those emails, it's a little bit of information that proves it. They immediately stop commenting. So what we have here out on the boards these days, on the YouTube boards, and I caution you against this little video that I'm playing about the sheep bumping heads. That's all it's done out there. I'll tell you what, you got to stop doing that. And I'm preaching to myself on that because you want to be right. You want to get in there. You want to fight. I mean, and it's not godly. And you're not going to, most of us are not going to convince Jacob's followers. And why is he called a cult? You don't need membership to be in a cult. He has a cult type following. And that's a fact because they will ignore the evidence and keep singing his praises, which is their right. But hey, how are they going to go through the deception of the Antichrist? That should caution anyone. And yes, they did pay for a trip to Israel, which I did not ask for. They did pay for that and gave me pocket money on that. And I told them, thank you for that. What they failed to mention is that I used about 86 hours in working up a budget to send to a wealthy businessman in South Africa for them when Jacob thought he could do Israel tours. Again, even though he was physically not capable, we got him this bike. Anyway, long story short, he decided it really wouldn't be best for his health to do those, even though they were really big money makers. So he decided not to do those. So I did spend a lot of hours on that. So they did reward me, or they were just nice and sent me to Israel, and I told them thank you, and they did give me pocket money through that. But I never called into question when Jacob and David Lister, with their friendship, would take those trips to Maui to award themselves at the end of the year for their hard work. Trips to Maui to a real expensive, nice hotel and resort. And hey, if that's the way they want to spend ministry money, that's their thing. I didn't see the books on that, so I'm just taking them at their word. They did go out there. David had sent me back pictures of Jacob's legs and all that, and pretty gross. And you get edema from being overweight, and Jacob has other health problems. And I could wave a bunch of papers because Jacob sent us all the big M's. There's big M's and little M's, like John Haller and all them are the little M's. Big M's would be inner circle. I'll tell you what, they sent me doctor reports. I'm not going to put those up online. That's nobody's business. But there's other problems in there that Jacob has, some pretty big size health problems, and his weight gain caused the edema. His appetite, I've seen him eat 2.5 pounds of Arby's beef, even though they're kosher, and a large milkshake. And he has a huge appetite. He's got to cut down his calorie count, or he's not going to be around. And that goes the same for John Haller. That goes the same for Bill Randalls. Anybody who's overweight, and I struggle with weight as well. There's a lot of food out there that's just not good for you. So, hey, I'm preaching to myself too. You got to watch the calorie count. But edema does not cause the weight gain. It's Jacob's got it backwards, and Jacob knows better because he knows what pharmaceuticals would do to you, as well as what diseases that he has that cause the edema. And one of those is being overweight. So, in all this, I know how they're going to attack me. They're going to say, I'm sour grapes. No, I don't want to work for Moriel anymore. I hope I've made that apparent. And I can see Bill Randalls in the background going, oh, at least they're not talking about me for a while, meaning Moriel.
I'm packing you an extra pair of shoes and your angry eyes, just in case. And if you get hungry, here's some cheese puffs.
If you want to be part of that fighting and fussing online, go for it. I think it causes a lot of stress in your life. And I don't know about you, but there's enough stress going around in life in America to not go out there and have to be right all the time. Are people going to slander me after this? They absolutely will. Are they going to lie about me? They're already doing that. And I'm not playing the victim either. It comes with the territory, And I feel bad because Jacob is like one of those guys, one of those rock stars who never quite made it. I think that's why he was so adamant about challenging such big rollers like John MacArthur and stuff like that. And I think I know what some of the sources of his anger are, but I think that's why he challenges those big guys because this is my opinion. He's never made it to the point where he thought he should have because of his knowledge. And I'll tell you what, folks, a lot of his knowledge is just book knowledge. I mean, he comes off as this brilliant guy and he just knows a little bit about a lot of stuff. In ending this, there was a time we were going to do a video on music, and Jacob said, well, yeah, I want you to play a paradiddle. So I teach, drum set's right behind me. I still teach, and a paradiddle is, right, left, right, left, right, left, and you could invert them and all that stuff. So I played a paradiddle. He says, no, that's not it. And he did just a real quick thing on the counter. I said, no, Jacob, that's not a paradiddle. That's not what it is. He insisted it was a paradiddle. So Jacob kind of shapes his own reality and denies the facts. And that's a dangerous place to be. I teach drums. I've played drums a long time. I'm not bragging about it. I just have the knowledge about that particular field. I don't speak Hebrew, or Greek or anything else. But Jacob decided not to do the video because he was mad because he didn't get his way. And feel bad for him, but hey, here's the facts. Here's some stuff to chew on and come to your own conclusions about Moriel because I already have. So God bless you and keep you. And I pray it's not going to change the minds of most Moriel followers. They are dedicated and they will come out there and tear you up on YouTube with no sense. And I think most of their aliases are fake anyway. None of them use their real names now on YouTube channel. When I reply, it'll show the Simply Agape Project because that's this YouTube channel, or it'll show my radio YouTube channel. Just like when Amos replies, it'll show his whatever it is he does. I'm not sure yet, but hey, enjoy the facts. They are the facts. They'll remain the facts. And I hope God opens your eyes before it's too late.
Dealing with false conversions, the most essential passage in Scripture tells us, you will know them by their fruits. If you do not see the fruit of the Spirit in a person's life at all, not that we're not all deficient in the fruit of the Spirit, but if you do not see a radical change in the person's life and lifestyle, certainly in the areas of morality, but also in the areas of the fruit of the Spirit in their life, in some way, to some degree that will be visible. That is a sign of a false conversion.